Wondering what the F has happened to your body and your life? You're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to Season 3 of Transforming 45, where we dive into the incredible stories of how brilliant humans are navigating the midlife squeeze with courage, passion, and a healthy dose of humor. Don't miss out on any of our heart-led episodes. Hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and if you're inspired, share an episode you love with a friend. It means more to me than I can express that you're choosing to spend time here and sharing our message of midlife revolution. So let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. I am really thrilled to welcome Wendy Cocke to the show today. She is a powerhouse in midlife transformation. She's the author of Making Flex Work, Defining Success on Your Own Terms, and Reimagining Your Work, Managing Your Career Like It's Your Business. For those of you who are listening, you can hear the smile in my voice because as I say each book, she holds them up. I absolutely love. So, as well as a founder of Engineering Leadership Solutions, with over 2 decades in Fortune 500 companies, she's led technical teams and teaches engineering, blending academic insight with practical application. Her midlife journey took a significant turn when, as a working mother, she sought a flexible work arrangement to balance career and family. Despite initial corporate skepticism, she leveraged this change to propel her career from engineer to director in R&D and operations. Today, she is passionate about helping others redefine success, and I can't wait to talk about that. Balance work-life demands and thrive in their own careers. Wendy, welcome to the show. So glad that you're here today.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks, Lisa.
All right, so here we go. First question. Who are you and how did life introduce you to this version?
So when people ask me who am I always start with my engineering roots because I speak fluent nerd. I think that's an important part of who I am. So I am a chemical engineer by training who spent most of my career doing industrial engineering work. And now I get to teach biomedical engineering, which is fun. But in 2022, I took an entirely different approach. My career took a 180 when I got laid off as a director in a Fortune 500 company. It was effective immediately, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just going to go find another job. That's what we do. I was in my early 40s. I had a middle school child and an elementary school child. I was nowhere ready for retirement. So I was just going to find another job, and my husband stopped me in my tracks. He actually stopped me the night I was preparing for the long all-day interview for the next big job. And he said to me, Wendy, what are you doing? Why are you going after this job? He said, you know what you want to do when you retire, and it doesn't just involve playing golf, laying on the beach, and watching YouTube. He said, you want to consult, and you want to teach, and you want to write. Why aren't you doing that? Take this opportunity. And I did. At just over 42 years old, I decided to change everything about my career. I never would have been a best-selling author if I had gone and just taken that next director level job. I definitely wouldn't have taken that leap into academics. And I wouldn't be able to be talking to people on podcasts like your show about all the different things they can do as they reimagine their work.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many intersections in our story. And it's one of the things that I love about the show is that, our contexts are so different and yet there is this kernel of truth that is very similar in everyone's story. And I think that's where the power lies, actually. And do you mind if I poke around in your who am I answer a little bit?
For sure.
Okay.
Do it.
So what is it that made you, what is the underlying you-ness that made you want to be, an engineer, made you want to do those things, and that allowed you to make this kind of transition?
So that's 2 very different answers. So I'll answer the first part and then the second part for you. What about me made me want to be an engineer? I love puzzles. I love all sorts of puzzles. Solving problems is one of my favorite things. And the particular type of puzzles I like to solve are people puzzles. which leads me into the second part, right? So I was great at math. I actually thought I wanted to work in a hospital, and I got some mentoring and some great advice as I was moving through high school. And my mom's periodontist, as a matter of fact, because as any good mom, she was talking about me to everyone in her network to try to figure out how to help me be whatever I was going to be moving through teenage life. And my periodontist, or her periodontist, said, really? That doesn't match with what I know about your daughter. And she invited me up for lunch. And we sat in her office for a couple of hours and we talked about all the things that teenage Wendy wanted to be. And she said, I love all those things. I love that you want to help people. I love that you are excited about the medical field. I love that you love math and puzzles. And she said, instead of helping just the patients in your hospital, why don't you go do biomedical engineering and you can help all the patients around the world? Now, Lisa, I am just old enough, and a lot of your listeners too, that biomedical engineering didn't actually exist yet. So they were creating this field in the 1990s when I was in college. And Georgia Tech had a great program where if you had gotten a 3.0 in chemical, electrical, or mechanical engineering, they would automatically let you take entrance into their biomedical engineering master's program. That's how they were building their program. So I chose chemical engineering simply because I wanted to be a biomedical engineer. Then I got involved on campus and realized there were so many other jobs I could do as a chemical engineer that I didn't need extra schooling for. So I jumped right in and started working on consumer products and feminine care and infant care right out of school, which doesn't feel like medical devices. Such an easy pivot, right? It's such an easy pivot. So I spent a combined total of 22 years working in medical devices before I left corporate. And now I still do a ton of technical consulting in the medical device world. But throughout that, I combine that piece, right, who I am, with the fact that I grew up in a small business. And that's really where Reimagine Your Work came from. The book I wrote, Reimagine Your Work, is around managing your career like you are a small business and the product that your business sells is you. And what that allows you to do is think about your features and benefits. See, growing up in a small business, I didn't realize that not everybody talked about inventory levels and shipping delays over dinner.
Right.
It was just normal. That was how my family interacted. And when I got into work, I realized that not everybody around me was asking the same sorts of questions and looking for the same sorts of opportunities because I just saw the world very differently. But all of those pieces put together meant that when I got laid off suddenly, it was like, okay, I've got this whole buffet of skills. What do I want to do next? Right?
Yeah.
I said yes to everything throughout my career, at least once. I would learn that I didn't want to say yes a second time, but once, I'll say once, yes.
And that's a really great and flexible way to approach new challenges, right? And I am interested. So how does teenage Wendy show up in Wendy now and what you're doing now?
Well, she is super curious and high energy. And I get to use a lot more of my personality now that I run my own business than I did when I was part of a corporate machine. That's not to say that I wasn't authentic the whole time, but I think that our brand and our personality is like a series of machine knobs, right? Those dials, and we choose how we turn them up and down based on the situation. So I've always been my authentic me, but I think the personality of teenage Wendy is much more reflective in 40-something-year-old Wendy than it was in 20 and 30-year-old.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's something that I'm really finding in the work that I am doing right now is this reconnection and as to that human that I was at that time. And listening to you talk about the knobs and dials as we turn ourselves up and turn ourselves down. I think for in all of the conversations that I've had for humans who kind of live at the fringes, I want to say, like the people who sort of push against the systems a little bit, who develop new ideas, the dial gets turned down. quite a bit for a long time. I mean, certainly that was my case. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot as well, because in my 2 decades as an educator, it's not like I was completely not myself. There were lots of times where I was, and there were big pieces of myself that I had to turn the volume all the way down on. And that becomes really exhausting when you have this, teenage self that still, you can still feel their enthusiasm. You can still feel their energy. You can still feel their excitement for life. And they want to pump up the volume.
For
And
sure.
so I think that it is so interesting that so many of us are doing this work at this time of this reconnection and of, turning the volume back up so that we can be here and present in our wholeness.
Yeah, it's fun to realize that who you are is more important towards your success than you really think it is. And I think as we get older, we feel more comfortable with who we are, right? We feel more comfortable with what we've accomplished, with what we know, with just being in our own shoes in a way, especially having gone into corporate. As a female engineer, I didn't look like most of the people around me. Right? Your audience can't see that I'm only 5'1", and that's probably being generous. But my husband's like, really? Is that how tall you think you are? But I mean, I was often one of the few females in the room. I was the smallest person in the room. And I probably had the biggest personality of all the people in the room. Well, that is a combination you have to get really comfortable with, or you have to figure out how to adjust appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that is where, representation matters, right? That conversation around how do we make this space comfortable for everyone to be in? Because it is that discomfort that we feel about being the only woman in the room or the only person of color in the room or whoever you are, whatever identity you hold, and not seeing yourself represented. That is part of the turning the dial down, right?
Oh, for
Of,
sure. For sure.
Yeah. Of the don't see me as much because I already feel vulnerable just being here.
Yeah. When you said in my bio, we talked about the fact that I asked for a part-time flexible work arrangement in my early 30s. When I had my first child, I was like, this is not working for me. All the things that I thought made me a good mother were not, I just couldn't do it. I felt like I was failing at everything, right? All of a sudden, I was a mediocre wife. I wasn't the kind of mom I wanted to be. I wasn't being a good friend. I wasn't the kind of employee that I wanted to be. And what that meant is that I felt like a failure. And as a type A high achiever, that is not what we wanted to feel like, right? And I said, I can't do it anymore. And I went out and asked for a flexible work arrangement.
Yeah.
And that I hit it. Once they said yes, so it took me 11 months to get it. It took me 11 months because I worked at a company that had a policy for it. But just because there's a policy doesn't mean anybody actually knows how to do it. I had an amazing boss who had said, yes, let's do it. And then literally John and I stared at each other blankly like, okay, now what? Like, you said yes and I said yes and I don't know what to do. So it took a while to navigate through that. And then once I got it, I hid it. I protected it. I was so scared that if somebody found out, the wrong person found out, they would just snatch it away from me. And I had a flexible work arrangement for probably 7 years when I got a call from the head of HR, the CHRO of the company, who wanted to have a one-on-one. And I was crushed. It was crushed because I was like, this is the day. This is the day I lose that flexibility that's important to me. And at that point, I had 2 children. And she called me into her office and she said, let me start by saying I have no intention of taking away your flexible work arrangement. She said, what I want you to know is that nobody has ever, in the history of my career, I've never seen anybody make it work part-time for this long and continue to get promoted along or ahead of her peers. So what are you doing different? And I said, well, it's all about being flexible. And she and I talked through it, and she said, oh, you have like a plan. I said, yeah, I have a plan. I'm a working mom with 2 kids. Of course I have a plan. I'm an engineer. Of course I have a plan. What about this makes you think I'm not going to have a plan? And she said, okay, so here is your obligation. At this point, I was an associate director in the company. And there was, between me and the CEO was a bunch of men, right? And she said, you are obligated to tell everyone that you are part-time and that you're on a flexible work arrangement. She said, because I need people in the company to see that it's not just a policy, it's possible. And that became the basis of my first book, Making Flex Work. It was what I was doing to make it work. And what I found out, I started coaching everybody. You know, in that first 6 months, every woman in the department probably came to ask me about going part-time. And half the men, right? This was pre-COVID. This was when we didn't talk about that. This was in a place where when I went part-time, you had to plug your computer into the wall to get internet. So if I can make it work when I had to have a cable tethering me to an outlet so I could get internet, anybody should be able to do it today. We can get internet anywhere, including the middle of the ocean. Like,
right?
Anywhere.
I know this is one of the things that I am struggling to get my mind around, especially in the pre-COVID time, right? So we have been for, hundreds of years now in different incarnations, burning ourselves out, right? Like generation after generation. We keep going down that same road. And it's amazing to hear that you were able to make that work even pre-COVID. And then COVID happened. And we saw that it was possible to make this work and be flexible. And yet at this time, there seems to be this like reversion back to, and although I understand like having some time where there is human connection, interaction, I fully understand that. Don't worry about it. It's so good. Yeah. Happens all the time on my end too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, I fully support and understand needing to have human connection and interaction at times. I'm curious to hear why you think that there is this like reversion back to, no, we need to do this in the traditional ways.
Yeah, I get that question all the time. And I have 2 answers for you, maybe 3. So the first is just plain and simple business, right? We have companies who have buildings and they need them full. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to have that building. People don't like to talk about that. But if you've got investors and shareholders and you have this giant asset and it's sitting empty, as a leader, what are you going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about how this place is for community and this is where the work happens and we're going to get people back into it. So I think there's just this fundamental business that there's a lot of commercial real estate that these companies own that they need to do something with. The second is a leadership gap. We required leaders to be flexible for a short period of time during the pandemic. Well, we required a lot of people to do a lot of things that they didn't want to do for a short period of time during the pandemic. But that doesn't mean that they ever liked it or that they were ever trained on how to be effective. So we have these leaders who did what they had to do to survive for a couple of years. And now all they want to do is get back to where they can breathe and do the thing they've been trained to do. So it's not on them. It's on us, all of us, to make sure that we've set up an infrastructure so that those leaders can be successful this way. I tell a story that I didn't realize that the control that I needed in my own home. So I believe my family gives me a lot of leadership parallels. When I post on LinkedIn and when I talk to audiences, we always talk about my family and my kids. And for several years, we lived in the master bathroom of our house, 1 bathroom for everybody, even though we have 3 bathrooms in our house. Ours had been remodeled, and when you have 1 bathroom that is beautifully remodeled, everyone flocks to it. So 4 of us got ready in it every morning. Pre-COVID, well, when we got ready during COVID, we used it too, right?
Yeah.
On those days we got ready. And then This January, so 6 months ago, we remodeled the 2 bathrooms upstairs. And in the amount of time that it took for the remodelers to get out and my kids to realize they had brand new remodeled bathrooms, they started using them. And my anxiety in the morning went through the roof. All of a sudden, I was shouting out orders because I couldn't see that they were brushing their teeth. I couldn't see that they were on time. I couldn't see that they were actually in there doing what they needed to be doing, because leading with your eyeballs is way easier than having to trust that someone is doing the right thing. My children are turning 11 and 14 this week. There are no reasons that they don't know how to get themselves ready. And yet, I felt compelled to check on them all the time once I couldn't see them. And that's exactly what the leaders have when you're not working in person. When you're working in person, they can see that you're there. They can see that you're working. They can see what you're struggling with and jump in and help you. When you're at home, they have to trust that they told you exactly what they needed you to do, that you understood what they needed you to do, and that you are doing it, and that it will magically happen in the time frame that they have laid out for you. That's a lot of trust. And we also know that after the pandemic, there's been a lot of churn of employees. Right. So maybe they don't know you yet. I've lived with these kids for 11 and 14 years, and it was hard to trust them. You might be an employee that they've only known for a few weeks.
Right.
Right. So we have all those pieces in there. We have the offices, we have the training, and then we just have this human nature where it's just easier if I can see it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that you used the word easier, right? Because it's not necessarily better, right? It's just, you're right. It is easier. And in this post-pandemic time where we are sort of living in an upside down world and people's nervous systems are alight all the time, it makes a lot of sense that people are looking for what is comfortable and what is known, right? Because so much of our brain is taken up with trying to figure out what is happening in the world right now. So I totally understand that. And how do we shift, however? Because as long as we keep going down this road of the very traditional work schedule, we're going to keep doing the same thing we've always done, right? Like the story that I hear all the time, and that is my own story as well, right? Like work, hit the wall, like hit the floor, and then reinvent. So how do we, from a structural level, so from the ground up, how do we start to shift that so that we can move away from the easier to the better?
Yeah, so as an employee, it is incumbent on us to make sure our leaders can trust us. As a society, we have to be trustworthy. We don't need to be going onto TikTok and talking about all the cool mouse wiggly technologies that we can find that says, hey, look how I'm not working. We need to be able to push back when we think we're being asked to do something that's not our job and not revert to that quiet quitting trend that we had a few years ago. That's not an adult way to deal with conflict. So we have to prove that we're trustworthy. We also have to give grace to those leaders to say, I actually have to build that trust. I don't just get it because you hired me. I have to earn it. And so I am going to go into the office, or maybe I am going to let you check on me a little bit more until I can earn that trust. And I'm not going to feel slighted. I'm not going to feel micromanaged. Not going to complain about it because I haven't earned it yet. So I think that's part of it. The other part is as leaders. So if you have the opportunity to influence work at any level, you have to be willing to take the risk. And I believe that it is beneficial to you as the leader to take that risk, because the leaders that get really good at this are going to be able to pull from the best talent anywhere in the world, because they won't be tied to a geography. And by the way, those absolute rock star employees anywhere in the world are not going to have to settle for the best leader in their geography. They're going to be able to work for the best leader in the best organization anywhere they want. And if you want to be seen as either that best employee or that best leader, this is the time to take some calculated risks. and work together. When I started my flexible work arrangement, I went on a 90-day trial. And I encourage everyone to do this. Ask for 90 days. Maybe you'll get 60, maybe you'll get 30. 90 is sort of a sweet spot. One, it allows the leader to not have to commit to forever. So they can say, yeah, we could try it. And if it doesn't work for them, they can stop. But during that 90 days, I talked to every person I worked with. And I said, look, I really need this to work for my family. So over the next 90 days, if anything doesn't work for you, I need you to tell me immediately so I can change it. This is a partnership. I need you to be able to get exactly what you need, and I need this 90 days to work. So let's constantly figure it out as we go. Right? The R&D in me, that research engineer said, this is a puzzle we can solve if I get enough data. So being willing to say, this is what I need, this is what I think I can do, and then do it as an experiment together, I think that's the way we change it. Because all those experiments, we're going to figure out what are the best practices for these people as a group, as individuals, and as organizations. Because each group of people has its own unique culture. And what works with one group doesn't work with another group. And that's okay.
Mhm.
But we have to figure out what works for the groups that we're in.
Yeah. And I think that is a key part. And it's something that we are so really, I talk about this every day in the menopause world, that every person's journey is so different and so unique. And so we really have to focus on the person who's in front of us. And we live in a world that is built on standards, right? And I'm not using standards in a derogatory way. I mean, we need to have standards to make sure that things function well and that we have good quality care and products and all of the things. The standard I'm talking about is like standardization of everybody being the same, right? It's that industrial revolution model of everybody has to fit in this box. And the truth is, humans have never fit into that box. But it is a really big mind shift to go from creating something that is the same for everybody and thinking that that's equal, which it never has been, and switching to that mindset of it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. Let's find what works for each individual, each group, each section.
Yeah, I think one of the things you said there is that equal is not the same. And, we talk about that in my house. The 11-year-old and the 14-year-old, if I have the same rules, those are in fact unfair. That is not being fair to either of you. If I held the 11-year-old to the expectations of the 14-year-old, that's not fair to the 11-year-old. And if I controlled the 14-year-old to the level that I take care of and control the 11-year-old, that's not fair to the 14-year-old. So by definition, I have to treat them differently in order to treat them fairly. And when we work, I believe that being happy and balanced in your work is really a 3-pronged approach. So there is your skill level and how it matches with the job. There's your interest level and how it matches with the job. And then there is the fit with your team and your manager. And if any of those are off, you don't feel like you're in a space where you can thrive. But here's what I know. Someone who's totally in balance in one job takes a job in a different function. Now, does that function match with their skills anymore? Maybe not. So maybe they took it to grow. Well, they're not as effective right away because they literally took it to grow because they didn't have that. Or what if we reorganize them and we move them by our choice, not theirs, and it doesn't fit with their interest anymore? Or what if they're a high performer and we change their leadership structure and now there's no match there? All of these things can make us more or less effective. So even treating me the same today as you treat me tomorrow might not be fair because of all those other pieces.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what did a flexible work schedule look like for you?
Yeah, for me, no 2 days looked the same. So I went on a flexible schedule in 2011 and I've never looked back. Today, still my days don't look the same. So I went from a 40-hour to a 32-hour work week in a Fortune 100 company at the time. They had some natural break points on where your benefits would go. And 32 was the one that kept you as a benefit earning employee at the time. Some companies that's 30, some go to 20. You'll just have to find out what it is for your organization. But at that point, they took I got 80% of my pay and 80% of my benefits and 80% of my vacation. That was the policy. I said, great, I'll take that. Sounds good. And what I did with that is I started a time log, literally clocking myself in and out as a salaried white collar employee, somebody who did not clock, punch a clock. I just kept a running log of when I was working and when I was not at work. That meant that if all my hours got used up by Thursday, there was one day I worked a 90-minute Friday. I worked for a leader at the time that 32 hours was very important to him. So I showed up on a Friday morning. Instead of at 8, I rolled in around 9. And at 10:30, I was packing up. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm done. He said, what do you mean you're done? And I said, well, that was 32 hours. I'm done. And he said, well, why did you come in? And I said, because you've made a very big deal about my 32 hours. And he stopped. He's like, well, that's not very smart, is it? I said, no, because now that I'm here, I'm happy to work until lunch. But if you told me it's 32, yeah, it's 32. And he said, okay, well, we can be a little bit more flexible with it. I think we probably can, right? So if it meant that I needed to travel for 3 days, well, that sucks up a lot of time. But that also means I got it back on the ends, and on the macro scale, it was 32. Some weeks it might have been 35. Some weeks were 40. Some weeks you have to travel and it needs more time. Okay, so I'm just going to take it out the next week when my kid has a doctor's appointment or I want to go early to take care of something. I literally just floated it. And I have free resources on my website for any of your listeners that want to try this out. So at makingflexwork.com, they can go get weekly trackers that they can just print off and write it. But it can be as simple as a piece of paper and just writing down. I started at 8. I ended at, 4. Okay, that's 8 hours. Is it? Did I have lunch? How am I counting lunch? These are kind of discussions you want to have with your leader as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And how did you find that shifting to this structure changed the way you showed up in your life?
It meant I could do the things I needed to do in my personal life when I wasn't at work. So as a mom with 2 kids and, a spouse, and then my mom and my grandmother, who is now 95 with dementia, they're a part of our family unit. They live next door. And trying to keep all of that, all those appointments, all of those schedules, everyone's needs, everyone's pieces. That's a lot when you're also trying to do it in the midst of your workday. So I felt frantic all the time. Being able to know that most days I was done with work between 3 and 4 o'clock meant that, well, I don't know about where you are, but where I live in Atlanta, Georgia, most places are still open between 3 and 4 o'clock. So I could make all those appointments, all those phone calls, all of that outside of work. And it took off the mental load of doing it. When I was a breastfeeding mom, it meant I could get to the daycare before one more pumping session was necessary. When I was trying to find time to work out, it meant that there was that little bit of buffer before the end of the children's day that I could still get that workout in instead of pushing it off until after dinner, after bath, after bed, and then saying, you know what, I'm too tired, I give up. It really just gave me that buffer to do the things that were important to sustain myself.
Mm-hmm. I think that's key. And I really relate to that in a lot of ways, coming out of the education world. One, nothing was ever, the job was never done. And I would say that is one of the things that weighed on me the most, being someone who really took a lot of pride in really being invested and caring and doing the best I could for the humans who are in front of me. It weighed on me all the time, that feeling of the job is never done. There were always things that I couldn't do. And that was just in my work world. And then, like you said, we layer on the responsibilities of our children and our partners and our homes and all of the humans that we have some connection to or responsibility with. And it is inhuman, right? I said that too when I was coaching other educators. I would always say, look, this job is impossible. It is an impossible place that we've put you into. And that means making choices. But those choices are also really hard and impossible. And when I think back to my last year as an educator, I was teaching grade 6 online, and my school day started at 8:30. So I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get my workout in, to get, everybody doing what they needed to do, to be out of the door by 7:30 so that I had the time in my classroom to get organized before the digital kids flew in. And then I would be there for hours after, because I was literally creating absolutely everything to be individual for the young humans who are in my space. And it is no wonder that my hair started falling out, and that I had no energy, and that I was ragey all the time. I also know now that perimenopause was part of the underlying factors of that. And
That's right.
All of those life conditions made me not the person I wanted to be. And so thank you for sharing that it is possible to live life in another way, right? To be able to make some space for yourself, because I do think that that's part of the work that we are doing in this time of saying, you as an individual are also important, right?
You have to be. Nobody's going to care about you as much as you care about you. You have to take care of yourself. And as women, we're not great at that. We are great at taking care of everyone else. One of probably the most impactful trainings I ever took as a young engineer employee was around this idea that women are not so great at bragging about themselves. And they said, that's great. Get yourself into a circle of women who will brag about you. And I think that has carried through in my life. One, I brag on all the women in my life. But two, we're never going to take care of ourselves as well as we take care of each other. And so having that group of other women who can say, hey, you aren't doing what you need to be doing for yourself because I'm watching out for you. It's way easier for me to say, Lisa, you haven't been to the gym in a week. Are you okay with that? Or what can we do to balance that? Is much easier than looking in the mirror and saying, Wendy, you haven't been to the gym in a week. Now what?
Yeah, absolutely. That I talk about this all the time. That element of community is so important. We were never meant to do this alone, and we were never meant to sacrifice everything about ourselves to be in service to other people. So I'm grateful to you for sharing this work that you are doing and that you are leading. So where can people find you if they want to connect and figure out how they can make this work in their own lives?
Excellent. So there are 3 websites they can go to, and they don't have to remember all 3 of them. They point to the same place. So in line with the first book, Making Flex Work, you can go to makingflexwork.com. In line with the second book, Reimagine Your Work, you can go to reimagineyourwork.com. And then my business is Engineering Leadership Solutions. You can go to engineeringleadershipsolutions.com. All 3 of those are going to point you right to me. I'm also really active on LinkedIn with tips around flexible work, reimagining your career development, and leadership. And I am on LinkedIn as Wendy Anderson Cocke. I don't know if there's actually a Wendy Cocke without the Anderson. Maybe find her too. Maybe she's amazing.
Yeah, we lift everybody up around
That's
here.
Right.
That's great. All right, Wendy, thank you so much for sharing your story and being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of the Transforming 45 community. Your support means the world to us. Stay tuned for more juicy episodes, and remember to keep showing up to your life with the love and magic you deserve. Until next time.